Dive deep. Dive beyond. Today in Paradroid Podcast Synthetic. Prepare for data infusion. 3, 2, 1. Good morning, curious minds. As we explore today's global developments, consider this question. In an era where humanity simultaneously reaches for the stars and struggles with earthbound conflicts, how do we balance technological progress with our fundamental human values? Our world spins forward into remarkable territory. The 2024 U.S. presidential election demonstrates this perfectly, as NASA astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore cast their votes from the International Space Station, democracy reaching 250 miles into space. These votes, floating above Earth, symbolize both our technological achievement and our commitment to preserving democratic institutions as we push into new frontiers. The intersection of tradition and innovation continues with Japan's groundbreaking LignoSat launch, the world's first wooden satellite. This marriage of ancient material and cutting-edge technology represents a potential revolution in sustainable space exploration. Unlike conventional satellites that orbit as debris for centuries after their operational life, these wooden pioneers would naturally degrade. Here we witness human ingenuity finding solutions in unexpected places. Yet while we reach skyward, earthbound challenges persist. In Gaza, Israeli airstrikes have resulted in 31 Palestinian casualties within 24 hours. This ongoing conflict reminds us that while some of humanity explores the cosmos, others remain trapped in cycles of violence that seem as old as civilization itself. In China, a tragic incident in Zhuhai has claimed 35 lives and left 43 injured after a driver, reportedly distressed over a divorce settlement, struck a crowd. These events, though different in nature, highlight the delicate balance between technological progress and human vulnerability. The global political landscape continues its evolution. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte has called for increased Western support for Ukraine, emphasizing the need to alter the conflict's trajectory. This isn't merely about military aid. It represents the broader challenge of maintaining international stability in an increasingly complex world. Germany faces its own pivotal moment as Chancellor Olaf Scholz prepares for a confidence vote on December 16th. This could trigger early elections in February, potentially reshaping one of Europe's most influential nations during a critical period of global transformation. Meanwhile, Italian authorities have uncovered a sophisticated network of art forgers creating counterfeit works by Warhol, Banksy, and Picasso. This story transcends simple criminality. It raises profound questions about authenticity in our digital age. As technology makes perfect replication increasingly possible, how do we preserve the value of human creativity? Returning to American politics, the potential Trump administration's nominations signal possible shifts in both domestic and international policy. Marco Rubio for Secretary of State and Kristi Noem for Homeland Security could reshape America's approach to global affairs at a crucial moment when international cooperation becomes increasingly vital for addressing challenges from climate change to space exploration. As we reflect on today's developments, our opening question takes on new dimensions. The balance between technological progress and human values isn't just an abstract concept. It manifests in every story we've covered. From voting in space to wooden satellites, from international conflicts to art forgery, we see humanity grappling with this fundamental challenge. Perhaps the answer lies not in choosing between progress and humanity, but in recognizing their inseparable nature. The wooden satellite represents sustainable technology. Space-based voting demonstrates democracy's adaptability. Even our conflicts and challenges show the need for technological solutions guided by human wisdom and compassion. Looking ahead, these developments suggest a world in rapid transition. Yet they also reveal enduring human constants, our drive to explore, our need for authentic expression, our struggle with conflict, and our persistent hope for resolution. Today's decisions, whether made in voting booths or space stations, in diplomatic chambers or art galleries, will echo through generations to come. As we conclude today's journey through these interconnected narratives, I invite you to continue pondering our initial question. How do we maintain our humanity while embracing progress? The answer may lie in recognizing that true progress isn't measured solely by technological advancement, but by how we use that advancement to preserve and enhance our fundamental human values. Data infusion complete. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and stay curious.
Good morning. Ever think about how much control we actually have over our own security? Like, imagine feeling less safe just because of an election in another country thousands of miles away. Kind of a weird thought, right? Dive deep. Dive beyond. Today in Paradroid's podcast Synthetic, we're diving into European security and what one expert thinks it needs to do, like right now. Prepare for data infusion. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, it's a question that really makes you think, especially with what we're looking at today.
So we're doing a deep dive into this YouTube video. Europe needs to wake up fast. It's from the Warfronts channel. And it basically starts with this almost ridiculous scenario. You got Europe, right, with all its money and resources and smarts, and they're freaking out over a U.S. election.
Yeah, the video really gets into why they're so anxious. Like, why should Europeans feel like their safety depends on American voters? And it argues that it's this dependence on the U.S. for security that's been going on for decades.
It's like Europe's been outsourcing its defense to the U.S., and now they're like, uh-oh, maybe this wasn't such a good plan.
Yeah.
Especially with Russia being, well, Russia.
Right, and the video says that not taking Russia seriously was a huge mistake. They talk about the Ukraine war in 2022 as this, like, wake-up call that a lot of European leaders just snoozed through, like they were hoping Russia wouldn't be a real threat.
Which makes you wonder, how much can you rely on allies versus doing your own thing for defense? I mean, it's not just Europe. It's for any country that depends on others for security, you know?
Totally. And the video points out that even countries with strong militaries like France, they're global, or the UK, tons of history, even they seem to have gotten a little too comfortable.
And then you've got places like Finland and Poland who are super serious about defense, spending a lot.
Right.
It's like Europe's all over the place, some in front, some lagging behind.
That's a big thing the video brings up, that unevenness. They say Europe has all the pieces, good militaries, awesome defense companies, Rheinmetall, Saab, Thales, but they're missing that united leadership and investment to make it all work together.
Which is where that whole 2% of GDP for defense spending comes in. The video just shreds that number, saying 2% is a joke in today's world. They even have experts in there pushing for at least 3%.
And they have a point. Modern warfare is just expensive, period. High-tech stuff, moving things around, training, it all adds up. And if Europe wants to stand up to someone like Russia, that cost is only going up.
So money's the first problem.
Yeah.
What else does Europe need to fix? Because the video seems to be saying it's not just about throwing cash at the problem.
They're big on needing better leadership, and not from the usual suspects. Like, instead of waiting for Germany to lead, they say, look at France, the UK, especially Poland. They've been spending more than that 2%, and they're way tougher on Russia. It makes you think about who should be leading European security, you know?
Like, don't assume the old powers will fix it. Look at who's already doing something right. But they also say it's not even just spending more, it's spending it right.
Exactly. They talk about creative solutions, like buying tons of U.S. weapons at once to get a discount, or working with countries like South Korea. They make great stuff for less money. And importantly, making more stuff in Europe itself so they're not so reliant on others. They have this great example, actually.
The LNG terminals.
Yes. The video talks about how fast Europe built those new terminals when they had that energy crisis in 2022. It's like they cut through all the BS and just got it done because it was so urgent. Their point is, if they can do that for energy, they can do it for their own defense.
Makes you wonder, is Europe waiting for a real disaster before they get serious?
Yeah.
And with security, the stakes are way higher.
The video seems to think so. And they even bring up this really wild idea.
Conscription.
Yeah. They're saying even countries far away from Russia, like Portugal, maybe they need to think about bringing back the draft or some kind of mandatory service. That's a big deal, especially in Europe where they mostly got rid of that.
So back to our question about control. This video is saying Europe might have more control than they think, but they got to make some tough choices.
It definitely makes you think. It highlights how big of a problem Europe's facing.
And it's not just a European problem, right? The video spends a lot of time on what happens to the U.S. if Europe actually gets its act together.
They say a more independent Europe might not always agree with the U.S.
It makes you wonder, is the U.S. ready for a Europe that doesn't need them so much? A Europe that does its own thing, even if it goes against what the U.S. wants sometimes. They even bring up India, a U.S. ally, but they do what they want, even if it causes problems.
That India comparison is interesting. It's like saying the U.S.-Europe relationship could get a lot more complicated as Europe gets more powerful.
So the big question is, good thing or bad thing? This world where the U.S. and Europe are more equal.
No easy answer, and the video doesn't pretend there is one. They just lay it all out, the good and the bad, and make you think about it. What's cool is that the video doesn't just say, hey, Europe's in trouble. They actually give you things to do about it. Some of it's pretty radical.
Okay, so besides spending more on defense, what are some of these radical ideas?
Well, they say Europe needs to completely change how it makes weapons, like throw out the old rules to make things faster. They even compare it to those LNG terminals, like think wartime, even if there's not a war yet.
So thinking bigger, faster.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're making more weapons, that means figuring out how to do it without going broke.
Exactly. It's not just spending, it's spending smart. They say, buy American weapons in bulk, get a discount, work with South Korea, their stuff's good, A&D cheaper, and most importantly, make more stuff in Europe itself, so they're not always depending on someone else.
So diversifying, being more independent. But wouldn't that be a mess, trying to get all these different countries on the same page?
That's where strong leadership comes in. They say Europe needs someone who can get everyone working together. And it might not be the usual countries. They actually point to Poland. They've been way ahead of the game on defense.
Poland stepping up is interesting. It's like the video is saying, look, the power is already shifting in Europe.
Right. Poland's become a major player, both with their military and politically. And they're not afraid to call out Russia. The video says other countries should look at Poland. They're not just talking, they're doing something.
But is that tough guy approach going to work for everyone in Europe? Some might not want to poke the bear too much.
True. But the video says doing nothing is way worse than being tough. They even describe what could happen. Pretty scary stuff.
Like buildings destroyed, cities on fire, bombs going off. Not a pretty picture.
Nope. They're not sugarcoating it. They want people to understand this is serious. They even compare it to some of the worst times in European history, like learn from your mistakes or you'll make them again.
They're not messing around, that's for sure. It feels like more than just talking about policy. It's urgent,
Definitely. And that urgency is really clear in their final message. It's like a challenge to anyone in charge in Europe. Get moving or get ready for someone else to decide your future.
That's a heavy message. It makes you realize this isn't just some debate. It could be a real war with real consequences.
And they're saying time's running out. Europe needs to act now to be ready.
So back to that feeling of being powerless. It seems like the video is saying Europe has more power than they think.
Yeah.
But they have to be tough and they got to act fast.
Exactly. It's a wake-up call, but it's also saying you can do something about it.
We've talked about the problems, but the video also talks about solutions and what could be good.
Yeah.
Like that idea of a world with more than just one superpower.
Yeah, a world where the U.S. and Europe are more equal, each doing their own thing.
Right now, the U.S. is basically in charge of European security. But imagine Europe taking care of itself, doing what IT wants, even if the U.S. doesn't like it.
That's a huge change. And the video even talks about, European warships going through the Taiwan Strait.
Right. Now that's seen as supporting the U.S. But if Europe's focused on its own problems, they might not do that anymore.
Right. And that could change who has the power in that part of the world. The video is not saying Europe and the U.S. will become enemies, but their goals won't always be the same.
Makes you wonder, is the U.S. ready for a Europe that doesn't need them so much? They even compare it to India. They're a U.S. ally, but they do what they want, even if the U.S. gets mad.
That India thing is really interesting. The U.S.-Europe relationship could become way more complicated.
So the question is, good thing or bad thing? This world with more than one superpower.
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the video doesn't say they have the answer. They just make you think about it.
It's like watching a play where the U.S. has been the star for so long, and now the other actors want a bigger part.
And that can be good. It shows the world how it really is, with power spread out. But it also means everyone has to adjust, the actors and the audience.
A lot to think about. It makes you wonder what kind of world we want and what Europe's role should be. But before we go too far down that road,
Before we get into all that, there's one more thing in the video that really stood out to me. They talk about what regular people in Europe can actually do.
yeah, it's not just for governments and armies. It's like, hey, if you're worried, here's what you can do.
And it's not all doom and gloom. It's actually pretty hopeful. Like, you can actually make a difference.
So instead of just watching, you can do something. Like what kinds of things?
They say get involved in politics, push for more defense spending, learn about what's going on, support the right leaders.
They even say maybe think about things like national service.
Mm.
It's cool how they connect all that to making Europe safer.
It's like security isn't just the government's job, it's everyone's.
Which takes us back to that control thing we were talking about. The video says we might have more control than we think, but we got to use it.
And it starts with knowing what's going on. That's what the video is trying to do, wake people up.
It's a good point. It made me realize, yeah, security isn't something that just happens. We're part of it. By the choices we make, the things we talk about, what we actually do.
And that can be a lot of things. Just staying informed, talking to people about it, voting for the right people.
Or even bigger things like pushing for new policies, supporting defense stuff, maybe even volunteering or doing national service.
The point is, everyone can help make Europe safer. And like the video says, that's not a sure thing right now.
They use this image of like a window closing, time running out.
Yeah, it's urgent. It's a message for leaders, but for all of us.
So thinking back to that feeling of being powerless, does all this change how you see it? For me, it does. It shows the problems into the answers and that we're all part of it.
Totally agree. It's a wake-up call, but it's also like, okay, now what are you going to do? What we choose, each of us and all of us together, that's what decides the future for Europe, for the whole world, really.
Well said. And on that note, we're at the end of our deep dive. Thinking back to the beginning, does knowing that you can impact your security change how you see your relationship with it? Make sure to check out the full video, Europe Needs to Wake Up Fast, on Warfront's YouTube channel to learn more.
It's worth watching. It really makes you think, and hopefully makes you want to do something.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. The future is in our hands.